On today's show, you've all been asking for it, more on KPJ. I'm going to bring in somebody that knows far more about Kevin Porter Jr., the player, and the NBA player in general, on today's Locked On Off-Season Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA. Going into my 20th season as a Clipper fan this fall. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and NBA content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Or I want you to let me know what you think of this episode. A lot of you guys have been asking me about Kevin Porter Jr., and joining me today to talk about him is somebody who knows a lot more about Kevin Porter, the NBA player, than I do, and that is Jackson Gatlin, the host of Locked On Rockets. Jackson, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Excited to be here. Excited to hopefully share some insight about KPJ. I think you should have pump faked everybody and been like, host of Locked On Cavaliers, and gone all the way back to the rookie season. No, look, I'm excited to at least, hopefully help prepare Clippers fans for what to expect out of Kevin Porter Jr. this upcoming season.
Yep, and we'll talk about where he fits with the Clippers, as well as a little bit of Clippers Rockets, a storyline that's going to be, something that I'm going to be keeping tabs on over the course of the season. But before we get started, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com to place your bets on any sport right now. NFL is big time because the season just began, so head on over to FanDuel. But let's start with it. Kevin Porter Jr., a lot of talk about him. We know about the off-court stuff, so we'll keep that out of the picture for this episode. I really just want to talk about the player that KPJ is, but also the stuff that he did off the court in terms of like the conduct stuff with the Rockets, the John Lucas stuff, all that. So give me a nice summary, and you can go on as long as you want, about Kevin Porter Jr., the Houston Rocket, from when he got there to when it all ended for him.
Well, he was, an attempted, rehabilitation project for the Houston Rockets and general manager Rafael Stone, right? I think in a way he was looking for kind of his own version of maybe the James Harden trade from the Daryl Morey era, although obviously James Harden was a very successful six-man with OKC Thunder or whatever. KPJ had fallen out of favor in Cleveland. The Rockets got him for a top 55 protected second-round pick, essentially nothing. And they brought him into Houston because they really felt that with the, stewardship of John Lucas, who is widely regarded as one of the best kind of mentoring type figures in the NBA landscape, has garnered a lot of respect over his years, in the NBA, from, players to coaches to scouts to executives all across the board. They really thought that they could, with a fresh change of scenery and everything, kind of get KPJ's career turned around. And from the on the court product, I do think we saw a KPJ that you got glimpses, you saw flashes of, a really talented player, a guy that had, sky high potential offensively as a true lead guard, showcasing both his own ability to create his own shot and score the basketball at a pretty high level with some decent efficiency to go with it, as well as the ability to play, make, and create for others. The Rockets essentially kind of threw him into that point guard mold. They brought him over, and his first season he played only about 20 some odd games next to John Wall in that like really defunct, weird transitional year after James Harden left Houston. And then the following season, he took the reins completely. The Rockets iced out John Wall. They made KPJ the starting point guard, and they did that for 2 seasons under head coach Stephen Silas. Now, unfortunately, they had very little structure, very little expectations, a distinct lack of culture and identity during those couple seasons. But what we did see from KPJ was a guy who's clearly got a ton of talent, but the Rockets really didn't, I don't think, do a very good job of, I guess, molding or cultivating that talent in any reasonable direction. They just kind of rolled the ball out there and let him play like AAU style ball for 2 years, him and Jalen Green both. And so there were, handful of games where he would pop off, 25, 30 plus, whatever. Notably, he had the game where he scored was like 50 and like 11 assists or whatever against the Milwaukee Bucks, where Drew Holiday was his primary defender. And everybody was like salivating, thinking, oh my God, this guy's like the next big thing. He's going to be an all-star. Like he's going to save the Houston Rockets. And ultimately that never really came to fruition. A big part of some of KPJ's issues on the basketball court stem from, I think, a lack of accountability around him, both from the coaching staff and his teammates, and just the entire culture of the Houston Rockets team was really brutal for a couple of years there. So, you would see a lot of pouting. You'd see a lot of not getting back on defense. You'd see a lot of him driving to the basket, not getting a foul call, and then he'd be whining at the refs and forcing his team to play 4-on-5 defense, on certain possessions. And again, when you understand going into the season that you're going to be one of the worst, bottom 5 teams, bottom 3 teams in the league, it's really hard to have any set of, any semblance of like expectations or values or a commitment to like doing the right things on a basketball court. I do maintain that if the off the court stuff hadn't happened with KPJ, which it did, and that's the reality of the situation, but if it hadn't, I was really curious to see what Kevin Porter Jr. and what his talent what could be done with his talent with a top tier head coach in Ime Udoka. And I think that same principle kind of applies with Ty Lue, who's easily one of the best coaches in the association. Now that he's going to be in a situation, a team that is aspiring to play winning basketball, he'll have a solid mix of, actually a really good mix of veterans around him to kind of help, I guess, keep him in line instead of him taking on like a pseudo leadership role. Even though he was incredibly young while he was with the Rockets, he was kind of de facto leader and face of the team because Jalen Green was still just a baby and wasn't ready to like take on that vocal leadership role or anything. So KPJ kind of did it by default, even though he wasn't necessarily the best guy suited for the role. I was excited to see what he was going to be able to do with Ime Udoka because there's so much to be excited about when you look at him as a basketball player. He's a knockdown shooter. I think the season before he left the Rockets, he shot like, I want to say it was like 42%. I'm going off rip here. 42% on catch and shoot threes. So, you put him out there in a game where, he's got a high level creator like James Harden being able to create, get him some easy opportunities from beyond the arc. He should be able to convert those on a really high, at a really high percentage. And he's also a guy that you could, conceivably kind of hand the keys to and just say, hey, go to work. Right. And I think that's probably how the Clippers intend to use him this upcoming season.
Before we get into how he's going to fit with the Clippers. Last question, as far as KPJ with Houston, do you think it was more the environment being so disorganized that contributed to his play, or do you think he's part of why it was disorganized?
I do think it's a little bit of both because KPJ's biggest issue when he was in Houston is he was tasked with being the point guard, right? It takes a very, very special player to be able to go from being the number one option and being, the primary offensive weapon, whatever, to then turning, flipping a switch in your brain and becoming the primary facilitator, right? There's only a handful of players that can do that at a truly elite level. Guys like LeBron, James Harden, Steph Curry, whatever. And it's just really difficult when you don't have a clearly defined mold. And I think that there were stretches, especially that final season of KPJ in Houston, where he really struggled with deciding in a given game, okay, am I scoring now or am I facilitating now? And I think for him, being able to be put in a role where it's clearly defined, hey, you're going in and all your job is to score the ball. That's all you have to worry about doing. Don't worry about setting up your teammates. You could kind of see him like pressing a little bit and overthinking a lot of the things he was doing on the floor because he was just unsure how to approach his role on the court as the primary initiator for the team. So I think a lot of it does have to do with some of the disorganization of the team overall, right? If he had a better product around him, I'm sure it would have looked a lot better. Which is why, again, you put him in a situation like he's in with the Clippers now, where there's clearly, a number of different offensive options ahead of him. He's not going to be in a position where, the buck starts and stops with him. I think that there's a world where he can still be a really impactful NBA player under the right circumstances.
Coming up, going to be talking about where he fits with the Clippers, where we see him getting in the rotation. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to play fantasy sports every day. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including your home state of California. Of course, if you are listening from California, which most of you are, but if not, if you live in Texas and Georgia, you also can get in on the action with Prize Picks. And Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. All you got to do is download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNBA on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. I got to tell you a little something about Game Time. Game Time is the best place to get great deals on tickets last minute. Now, even though the Dodgers' home regular season is done, you can still try to use Game Time for the playoffs if you're a Dodger fan, and Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And with Game Time, you can get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I do plan on going to a playoff game, so I'm thinking about using Game Time. And, right now we have college football, we have NFL in the mix, we have the WNBA playoffs going on. So always consider using Game Time and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. We got one of the hosts right here with us, Jackson Gatlin. There is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jackson, so let's talk about where KPJ fits, because I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of the listeners have gone mad at me because I've said, I don't know if he has a spot right away in the rotation. And let me explain to you why I say that. So right now, the projected starting lineup, Ty Lue, and by the way, Clipper Nation, if you're wondering, didn't you say you were going to do an episode on the comments made by Ty Lue and Lawrence Frank at the Wednesday press conference? Yes, I think it was the Tuesday press conference. I was planning on it, but I wanted to give you guys this episode, and this is the time that Jackson and I could make it work. So the Friday episode will be that one. But let me just say this. This is what Ty Lue had to say on Kevin Porter Jr. He said he can definitely make an impact. You don't get paid $20 million a year in Houston if you can't play. He's a great talent. It's going to be my job to make sure we get the best out of him. He can score the basketball. He can make plays, and I'm going to stay on him and coach him hard. He's a great talent. So he said that twice. For us to have success, he's going to be a big part of that. So I'm excited for him and the opportunity to coach him. Now, okay, he says that, but let's just break it down, right? Starting lineup projected, even though Ty did say that people have to compete for their spots, what fans expect is James Harden, Kawhi, and Zoo, they're the locks. It's the two other spots that are up for grabs. I predict that Derrick Jones Jr. will be getting one of those spots, given that he just started on the Western Conference champions. So let's put Derrick Jones in there. Now that fifth spot is really between Terrence Mann and Norman Powell. Given that Terrence had it last year, let's just say it is Terrence, because Norm's been one of the best six men in the NBA for a little while, and he kind of has that role of the come in and just get buckets guy. So you have Norman Powell on the bench. You have a backup big, let's say Mo Bamba. That gives you the two players off the bench. Amir Coffey, he's been pretty regular in the Clippers rotation over the last year. I assume he gets in there as well. That's three guys. Now, the guy that the Clippers picked up that a lot of fans are excited about is Chris Dunn. So Chris Dunn to come in and defend at that backup point guard spot. Does KPJ fit in a little 3-man backcourt with Chris Dunn himself and Norman Powell? It really, I think, comes down to if Chris Dunn can make his open threes. But what do you see there, especially because the Clippers also have some young guys like Kobe Brown, Jordan Miller that are trying to find their way into the rotation. And I also forgot about Nicholas Batum. I'm sorry. He's a lock to play minutes. So Nicholas Batum, Norman Powell, and probably Mo Bamba as of now, because the Clippers are not going to have no backup center. So let's say those three are guaranteed minutes between Chris Dunn, Kevin Porter, Amir Coffey. Because I don't think we'll be playing 11 guys throughout the course of a season if everyone's healthy. What do you think about KPJ there?
Yeah, well, the weird thing with KPJ is, I mentioned some of the frustrations with like his, body language, whatever on the court in segment 1. When he's actually locked in, he's shown some really impressive capability as a defender. There were certain matchups where he even like had moments where he would not like clamp, because nobody can clamp LeBron, but like actually like one-on-one, like take like pride in like a one-on-one matchup against LeBron James and a couple different matchups against the Lakers in previous seasons. And so KPJ is a guy when motivated. And I think that's the key word here is, again, when you come from an organization where all you know is losing, where you've been losing for multiple seasons, and where there are no expectations, then it becomes really hard to want to do the little stuff, to want to do the things that you need to do to win basketball games. KPJ is not guaranteed anything on this Clippers team, right? He's going to have to fight and claw for whatever minutes he gets, for whatever role he can carve out for himself. And I think in a vacuum, KPJ, his talent level is sky high, right? And I think in a vacuum, KPJ versus Chris Dunn, if KPJ is motivated and locked in defensively, then I don't see why he couldn't absolutely beat out Chris Dunn for that final guard spot off the bench. I also think that you have to look at it and think, okay, well, how much is Ty Lue willing to play smaller to factor in guys who are maybe more conducive to winning basketball? Obviously, there's been the concerns that Lawrence Frank talked about with Kawhi's rehab proceedings and everything, and whether or not he'll be available to start the season is kind of a big question mark going into the year. If Kawhi is not ready to start the year, then that's a huge starting piece that you're going to be missing. That's an extra 30, 35 some odd minutes a night that you have to make up elsewhere in the roster. And the silver lining there is that might actually be what generates the opportunity for KPJ to kind of showcase, hey, I still got it, right? I can still play at a high level. I'm bought into what Ty Lue is preaching. I'm ready to be a defender. I'm ready to be whatever this team needs me to be. I'll be a playmaker. I'll be a shooter. I'll be a defender, whatever it needs to be. And he's got the tools to do it. That's the important part here is KPJ. I think the issue was when he was first drafted and when he was playing with the Cavs, he was actually more so in like a pseudo, like slightly undersized wing role. I think he came in his rookie year and he was like 220 something pounds, whatever. And he was a lot bigger. Like you go back and look at KPJ in his rookie season and he had a lot more muscle mass on him. And then he slimmed down considerably when he became the Rockets full-time point guard. They wanted him to slim down. They wanted him to be a little bit more agile, pick up the pace a little bit, that kind of thing. And depending on what the vision is for him with this Clippers team, right? It's not going to happen, between now and opening night, but over the course of a season, right? He could bulk up a little bit more. He can kind of build his body back to being more that wing type player instead of just a combo guard. Even though he is a little bit smaller than you would like out of a wing player, right? He's listed at 6'4". For a while there, his listed height was like 6'6". There's a lot of back and forth on like how tall he actually is. But again, heights are, how much difference is it to be a 6'4" wing versus a 6'5" or a 6'6" wing at the end of the day? It's all about your talent level. It's all about what you're capable of doing on the floor. And KPJ has shown when he is locked in, when he's motivated, he can be a good defender. The problem is that just didn't happen too often in Houston. The issue is I will say that Norm Powell, right? He's everything you would want out of like a sixth man kind of spark plug, microwave scorer, come in, win you the minute, I get hot and win you a game by himself, almost single-handedly, right? He has that ability. KPJ has a similar level of like scoring ability, but it's not anywhere as consistent as I would say Norman Powell's. So I don't necessarily see KPJ, I guess, like winning the minutes over Norman Powell, but I do think that there's a world for him to be utilized in conjunction with some of the other creators on the roster, right? Like if you can get KPJ, even if it's like 10, 15 minutes a night where he's out there playing alongside James Harden a little bit and being able to be just a spot up 3-point shooter, he's shown the ability to be a truly knockdown shooter. And that's something that can help with the spacing. That's something that can help with his, just offensive consistency across the board. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays compared to, I guess, a little bit of offensive defense substitution. Maybe it's like, okay, well, in this matchup, we really need Chris Dunn's defense. In this matchup, okay, we really want KPJ's offense. We want multiple dynamic guys out there on the court at the same time, because it's a lot harder to hone in on one guy if, let's say, Kawhi is injured, right? It's a lot harder to hone in and stop James Harden as like the one guy that you need to slow down if you've also got minutes where he's sharing the court with Norm and KPJ out there, because then you can't double and triple team James because you've got two other dynamite scorers who can take advantage of, a 4-on-3 or a whatever kind of, offensive advantage you have.
So I totally agree that when one of James Harden or Kawhi are out, KPJ will get minutes. It's more so when everyone's healthy. I'm wondering who's maybe not going to get the minutes, because I don't see Ty Lue going 11 deep, right? I see him going 10 deep. And as I said, Nico Batum, Mo Bamba, Norman Powell are kind of guaranteed those spots. Do you see the potential? And I know obviously I would know Ty Lue's tendencies better than anyone, but do you see the potential of maybe Chris Dunn, KPJ, and Norm sharing the court and Amir Coffey kind of being pushed to the side at all?
I guess I could see that a little. Ultimately, I think what it's going to come down to is, again, if there is that opportunity, and this is kind of like that's like that silver lining for a lot of these guys, right? For the guys who are kind of the fringe, like, a 10th, 11th, 12th guys on this Clippers roster, is whoever takes advantage of this opportunity at the beginning of the season, if Kawhi does miss time, could be the guy that gets that settles into that 9th or 10th slot as the season moves on, right? Once Kawhi comes back and he's healthy and he's back in the rotation, then whoever plays the bet. Maybe it's not KPJ, right? Maybe he struggles out the gate. Maybe he's not afforded that opportunity. Maybe he's super rusty from having an entire year away from the game. Yeah, he played overseas in Greece for like a handful of games, but it's really tough when you take a year off playing NBA basketball, right? You're not, maybe he, is he even in NBA playing shape, right? Is his conditioning where it needs to be? Is he ready to step back on an NBA court and be the same player, or at least a similar player that he was when he was in Houston? These are all really major question marks. These other guys don't have those question marks on their game. They're going to be more ready to hit the ground running, I think. So I don't know. It's really tough to say. I think the talent is absolutely there. And again, you start looking at just in a vacuum, right, between Norm Powell, KPJ, Chris Dunn, and Amir Coffey. I think that it's pretty safe that you say like Norm Powell and KPJ are the two clearly, best offensive players of that group. So it just kind of comes down to, what does Ty Lue ultimately need, right? Does he need more defensive-minded pieces and better size maybe around some of his other, more bigger offensive weapons? Or does he need other dynamic offensive creators, guys who can score the ball for themselves as well as creating for their teammates, especially in the absence of a James Harden? We know that this Clippers team led the league. It was either led league or second in the league, right? In like isolations per game last season. How does that change, right? With no Paul George this season, right? Do they play a more team-oriented brand of basketball now without having 3, or I guess at one point 4 different star players in James, Russ, Kawhi, and PG to kind of cycle and rotate through and say, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, whatever? Do they have to play a more team-oriented brand of basketball? And does that lend itself to guys who are more dynamic in their play, like KPJ and Norm Powell, being featured even a little bit more this season, as opposed to more of these one-dimensional kind of like 3-and-D role player-esque type guys?
Yeah, and I also think the second unit, it won't be just 5 bench players. I don't think the Clippers have the depth to do that. I don't think the bench is strong enough to do that. I think James Harden or Kawhi will be staggered, and one of them will be in at all times. So we'll see how that works out. But coming up, going to be talking about a little something between the Clippers and the Rockets this season that has implications for the future. Going to be talking about that with Jackson coming up. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's NFL season. Jackson, what's your NFL team? Are you a Texans fan?
Texans fan all the way, baby. CJ Stroud is the GOAT.
So this weekend, who you guys got? It says okay, home against the Jaguars. The line is -6.5 for you guys. What are you thinking?
Oh, take that easy. That's Jaguars are nothing.
And I've been saying against the Bears, the Bears are -3, but the Rams just beat the Niners. I honestly am feeling kind of lucky going with the Rams win there, but you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And where do you do that? FanDuel.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So the final segment, we've gotten everything out about KPJ. It's honestly just made me more intrigued about what possibilities could exist with him playing. I feel like after talking to you, he's going to get more time than I probably think. It just depends on how he's going to do it, Ty Lue. But let's talk about this. And I have kind of ruled out the Clippers' chances of winning a ring. I don't think we're a real championship contender this season, but we need to be better than the Rockets. And here's why. OKC, as we both know, has some control of our picks, and they will be taking the worst pick.
I think what you were trying to say is that at one point or another, OKC has bent over backwards the Clippers and the Rockets and taken their future respectively from both teams, unfortunately.
Exactly, but I will say this. Right now, you have Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün. You have that Tari Eason. You have that young core. The Clippers' young core are a bunch of guys that haven't even proven that they're NBA players yet, really, respectfully. And this season, I'd say most are picking the Clippers to finish a little higher than Houston, just given that we have Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. But the Rockets are an improving team. This is the year 2 of the Ime Udoka experiment. How much is your fan base and you guys talking about this whole thing? Because my thing is we just need to finish better than Houston, because unless the Rockets finish bottom 10, then it's a top 10 protected thing. You guys keep the pick. And in which case, OKC will swap with us. So my goal is my hope is that the Rockets are good enough to not be a top 10 pick and are still worse than the Clippers. Then the Thunder take your pick and we get to keep ours.
Well, what's funny is you go look at our friends over at FanDuel are predicting, at least as far as over under for season win totals, it got the Rockets at 43.5 and they've got the Clippers down at 38.5. So as far as just some of the sportsbook bettors are feeling, at least looks like the Rockets are expected to be the better team between the two. Look, Rockets are coming off a 41 win season, a 19 win improvement. They left a lot of wins on the table last year and they dealt with a lot. They didn't have Tari Eason for like 75% of the season. They lost their best player in Alperen Şengün for the final quarter of the season, right when they were kind of on the upswing too. Like if they had Alperen Şengün and if Jalen Green had gone supernova at the same time, I think they make the play-in tournament and they would have been the final seed instead of the Warriors potentially. That's revisionist history. Whatever, it happened, it didn't happen. Anyways, for this upcoming season though, I think it's going to be like, we just talked about this over at Locked On Rockets. The fact that the Clippers may or may not have Kawhi Leonard to start the season, like that's a huge benefit for the Rockets, because these are two teams that are going to be, directly competing for what I think is going to be one of the final spots in the Western Conference playoff race, right? Somewhere in that play-in tournament range or so. Ultimately, I don't know, like I am hard pressed to imagine the Rockets not taking another significant step forward this season, especially with how they played last year. They're going to get back Tari Eason healthy, and his impact when he's on the floor. Last season, Tari Eason's plus minus when he was on the court, Darian, it was a plus 12 in the minutes that he played. Wow. Like his plus minus numbers are just absurd. Like his impact on the game cannot be understated. They're getting Steven Adams, who was, I think, one of the most underrated pickups of any team in the entire association, but it's flying under the radar because they traded 3 second-round picks for him just ahead of the deadline last season while he was still rehabbing his injury. But right now, all reports are pointing to the fact that he's healthy, he's playing 5-on-5, and he's a standout at some of these Rockets practices so far, in preparation for training camp. So being able to have him as the backup to Alperen Şengün is going to be huge, right? A lot of people forget that Steven Adams was a huge part of the Memphis Grizzlies' success when they were the back-to-back 2 seed in the Western Conference, and he was their starting center. So I don't see a world where the Rockets finish as finish worse than the Clippers this year. And look, we could revisit this pod, months from now, and I could have a ton of egg on my face, whatever. But I think it's going to happen where the Rockets are going to take that next step forward that you expect a young team to take. I don't know if it's going to be like OKC, who had a 17 win improvement and became the best team in the Western Conference, because obviously they've got, SGA, MVP caliber player and a really, really good young core, arguably one of the deepest teams in the association. I don't think it's going to be that drastic of an improvement, but it's hard to imagine them not winning in the realm of like 46 to 50 wins this season, even though the West is going to be a bloodbath. And I just don't see how the Clippers keep up with the losses that they endured with PG, and also potentially Kawhi's status still being TBD at this point.
Okay, so you're going with Houston and finish with a better record. I like it.
I
like it. I mean, you got to be honest. And it's very possible. The only thing I'll say is your boy James Harden has never missed the playoffs in his entire career. So we're battling history here with that one. But Jackson, thank you so much for the episode and the insight on KPJ. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, go track me down over at Locked On Rockets 5 days a week, ramping up ahead of the season, just like Darian is over here. You can also catch me on Locked On NBA every single Monday.
Appreciate you, Jackson. Clipper Nation, let us know what you think of the episode in the comments below about KPJ's role. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper. And of course, Locked On Clippers, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe. Where I saw yesterday 5 subscribers away from 6,000. So can we get that by the end of this, by the time this episode airs or after this episode airs? Let's do it. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.